Okay, I am going to try to be a little bit quicker recording this demo than I was presenting it in class, just because um, I know that you can pause and work at your own speed, so I don't want to ramble on for too long here. We are going to start working with low poly today. So for the demo, you need to hop on to Schoology and download a photo here. So we'll head to our course and we will go to the low poly project. That's the unit we're in right now. We're learning about low poly. And then there are demos in here for you. So we need to go into this folder. The video recording will be in here, but here is the photo. This is the guy that we need to save. Sometimes there's a little download button down here, but you can also right click and hit save image as and save it to your file explorer. Once you get that saved, go to the Adobe Creative Cloud, this guy, that little rainbow app, remember, and make sure that Illustrator is up to date. If it says update available, go ahead and update it and then get started. Please, for sake of time, don't update every single app in here. Just update Illustrator, that way you can get working. Okay. Once it's updated and you have that photo, we need to open up an artboard. There is a note sheet that goes along with this, so feel free to kind of fill in notes. I'll try to make tips here as we go along of what you could fill out. But everything on that note sheet we will go over in this demo. To make a artboard here, it's similar to what we do in Photoshop. You need to hit New File, Print, title it your initials. You could call it Demo, Apple Demo. You want to be in inches. You want it to be 8.5 by 13. You want it to be in landscape, not portrait, landscape. You want it to be RGB. And then it should be high 300 pixels per inch for the raster effects. And hit create. And your artboard should look something like this. Really quick for me, go up to Window, Workspace, and hit Reset Essentials. That way I know your screen is kind of set up like mine. So it looks pretty similar to Photoshop, right? You have our tools on the left-hand side here in this little toolbar, and then we have some tabs over here on the right-hand side. We have our properties panel, and we have our layers, okay? Remember in Photoshop, your layers were down here at the bottom. We have less junk happening over here, which is kind of nice. If you feel like you have a lot of junk here, it's probably because this little AI section has popped up. You can go ahead and close it. We don't need it. Feel free to play around with it in the future, but for now, just click on this little arrow and close it up. That way you can see everything I'm seeing. We have our selection tool here. It's that little black arrow. This is going to make main selections and help you kind of move things around, similar to the move tool in Photoshop, okay? We have our properties panel over here. This is where we will be able to adjust anything that we are doing with a tool over here. You'll be able to come over here and kind of mess with anything. If you need to edit your artboard, when nothing's on here and you're kind of clicked off to the side, you can do that over here. You can edit your artboard, change the orientation, change the size, whatever you need to do. Your layers are also in here. It's a little bit smaller than what the layers were like in Photoshop, but similar idea here. You can turn on and off the visibility, lock a layer, unlock it, and we'll kind of keep looking back at this too. There's more that I want to show you in here, but just so you get an idea of how Illustrator is laid out here. We need to open up our image, so we're going to go to File and then click Open, just like you did in Photoshop. And then we need to find it. You can already see my demo there. So open that up. Yours probably will open up in a separate tab. and this tab has our artboard. If it opened on your artboard, huzzah, good for you. If not, you just need to click and then we're going to hold it and drag it up and drop it down into that artboard, just like you did with your rabbit head. It's much, much bigger, the images, than our artboard. You can see the bounds of my artboard back here. So we need to scale this down. So we're going to grab the corner and scale it down. Look what happens though, as I start to scale. My image starts to warp and it messes up what it looks like. In Photoshop, it's the other way. It kind of locks in what it looks like for you. To lock in the height and the width, you just need to hold down on Shift. Shift is a magic key, does lots of magic things. And when you're holding down Shift and scaling this down, it's going to lock in the height and width for you, which is super nice. Move it to the corner here, holding Shift and pulling it all the way out to the corner of my artboard. Okay. Once you have it scaled to your artboard here, we need to change the opacity. What is opacity? It just makes something more or less transparent. Transparent is just see-through. So we want to make this look more see-through. How can I do that? We need to click on the image. Once you click on the image, you should be able to see a path appear around your image. This is important, okay? Mine is blue, yours may be red. It's that little itty bitty tiny line. The path is showing you that yes, you are selected on that object. So as you keep working, pay attention to where the path is selected here. Also on the path, we have little tiny white squares. Those are anchor points, okay? So the path is the outline of the object, kind of the guideline of it, and the anchor points are determining where that guideline is going to be, kind of holding it in place. They're anchoring it down. So once you click on the image and you can for sure see the path, over here in our properties panel, we have an appearance section. We need to go to opacity, and I'm going to toggle it down to maybe like 50%. That way you can still see the image, but it's not as bright. Just like you did with your tracing practice, we are going to trace or draw on top of this. So lightening up helps us see it a little bit better. When I start drawing on top of here, I don't want this image to move around, so I'm going to lock this layer. So pop back into your layers. Go ahead and hit that little empty space to the right of the eyeball, and that will lock it, and I can't move it anymore. And then I'm also going to get into the habit of naming my layers here. So you can name it background, you can name it Apple image, whatever makes sense to you. Similar to Photoshop, as we work on our artboard, Illustrator is going to open up new layers, but they are hidden inside of this layer. So you have to toggle down with this little arrow, and you can see in this layer, I have my image on here. If I kept drawing in here, more layers would pop up with each little drawing I add in. We want to add our drawings onto a new layer, so we're going to go all the way down to the bottom, click on this little plus with the square. I drew this guy on my note sheet, drew a square with the plus, and wrote create new layer. I'm going to come up here and name this. You can name it drawing, you could name it low poly, just so that way we know we're going to draw on it. If you ever need to change the color of your path, so if you feel like having a red path is hard for you to see, I just double clicked out here in this open empty area, and I can change the color of it to whatever color I need it to be. Okay, I'm going to click on this layer to make sure I am on it. It's highlighted here. I'm going to go back to my properties panel. I want you to go to the pen tool here, not this guy. This guy with the little squiggle is the curvature tool. The third one down is the pen tool. That is what we need. So go ahead and click on it. Over here, you can see that we have a couple of adjustments in appearance for the pen tool. We have a fill color and a stroke color. I want you to go ahead and click on your screen with your pen tool so you can see it's dropped an anchor point. Pull that pen tool out, you can see the path start to pop off of that anchor point. I'm gonna drop another anchor point, drop another anchor point, and then I need to click back to that anchor point up there. This is important that we go back and click on an existing anchor point to kind of end the path. This is telling Illustrator that it's a closed image, not image shape here. If it's not closed, it will not fill in completely. So we always need to make sure that we're connecting to an anchor point or that our paths are crossing. So if I cross my paths, that's also closing off that shape there. So go ahead and draw one triangle. Once you get one triangle on here, come over to your appearance panel. I want you to click on that fill square and just pick a fill color, and then click on the stroke square and pick a stroke color, and look to the right of the stroke square. We have adjustments here for the size of the stroke. So you can make it really wide or really skinny. Once you get one triangle on there, go ahead and draw another one, connecting back to our anchor point, and pick a different fill color and a different stroke color. Do a different color. Once you have two triangles here, I want you to go back to your black selection tool. The quick key for that is just hitting V on your keyboard, and then just overlap these a little bit, not entirely, but just a section of them overlapping a little bit. And then I want you to click on the front one here, and then go over to your properties panel all the way down to where it says arrange. You click on arrange, we can not manually, we can automatically kind of shift our shapes around here. So if I have this triangle up in the front and I want it to be behind this triangle, I can hit send to back or send backwards. I'm going to hit send backwards, and boom, it goes right behind it. If I needed to bring it back to the front, I could click bring it to the front. So this is when you have to start thinking about your layers and how things are on top of each other, and if you need them to be on top of each other, okay? This arrange section is good for working with maybe one or two things that you just drew, or if you need to send something immediately to the front or immediately to the back. If you have about 50 to 70 triangles, I would not do this method. You can go into your layers, hit this little toggle arrow, and again, see everything you've drawn in here. So we can see both the triangles I've drawn. I can click on one and drag it up until that blue line appears and drop it down, and it will move in front of that. So if you have about 50 triangles and you need to move one up between two different things, this is the better location to do that manually. Go ahead and delete both of these out. So select one, you can see the path and the anchor points, and then click backspace. Select the other, you can see the path and the anchor points, backspace. Okay. We need to turn on a grid here before we get going. So I'm gonna go up into view, and I need to go all the way down to the bottom here. If you can't see what I'm getting ready to click on, your screen, you might have one little bar down at the bottom with a black triangle. It's an arrow pointing down. You may need to toggle that down. Just keep clicking until you can see what I'm getting ready to click on. We need to turn on our grid, so click Show Grid. We need to go back into view. We need to click on Snap to Grid, go back to view, and make sure that Snap to Point is turned on. So you should be able to see a grid, and Snap to Grid should have a blue check, and Snap to Point should now have a blue check. If you hate the color of your grid, or if it's behind your artboard here, we need to go to Edit, to Preferences, and then to Guides and Grid. You can change the color right here. This is for guides. We don't have any guides set up. This is for grid. Change color here. And then if your grid is in the back behind your artboard, uncheck this, okay? And then hit OK. I want you to go back to your pen tool. I want you to go back to your fill box. and shut the fill color off. So we're going to click the one that's white with the red stroke through it. That means there's no fill color. And then I want you to pick a stroke color that's easy for you to see on top of the apple. So probably not red, blue or something would be good. And I'm going to turn my stroke down a little bit. I want you to forget everything that I have taught you about our tracing practice. So all those low poly steps, ignore them right now. We are working with the left-hand side of this demo paper, demo artboard, the without low poly step section. What I want you to do is only focus on the apple and don't worry about little itty bitty detail. Just put a couple big triangles on here. I want you to think about connecting, oops, I'm on the wrong tool. Connecting anchor points, making triangles. So I connected an anchor point there. I'm going to make another triangle. I'm going to connect my next triangle down to this other one I made. And then let's say I want to put a triangle between these two here. If I'm getting ready to connect it here, watch what happens to my cursor. It turns into a little minus sign. So Illustrator thinks that I want to delete that point. To avoid doing that, you can either click off of that shape and then go back into your pen tool and connect them, or you can go the opposite direction. So I'm going to click on this guy that we're not currently working with and then connect them there. Since I've connected these anchor points, I don't need to finish the shape here. I know that this is connecting down here and this is connecting up here. So I'm gonna have a closed shape. To end this path, I'm just gonna hit Escape, ESC on my keyboard. So go ahead and keep practicing making some triangles on here. Making sure that you're being mindful of connecting anchor points and paths. And don't make itty bitty triangles. This is just for a demo. If you can't connect to a point, like there's no points here, just cross through that path. So don't stop before it, cross through it, and then drop your point. There's no one there. I'm gonna hit escape. Let me do that there. Go up here, connect. Focusing on connecting anchor points and trying to cover a majority of my apple. Not all of mine are perfect triangles, right? This guy has a bend, this guy has a bend. After you do that, go ahead and we're going to move over to this apple. Just make sure you have all of it connected and you focused on either crossing paths or connecting existing anchor points here. On the right-hand side, the one with low poly steps, we want to focus on those steps. So what was step number one? Main shapes, right? So we want to find the main shapes of our apple here. So I'm going to do the contour of my apple. I'm going to go all the way around it. Man, I keep clicking on the wrong tool. They're right next to each other. Go on the contour of my apple here. Trying to be pretty precise about everywhere I'm clicking. It's not ever going to be perfect because we're not making rounded edges, right? I'm going to get this highlight here. I feel like that's a pretty important main shape that I want to cut out. I'm connecting back to an existing anchor point. I connect to another existing anchor point up here for the rest of that. I'm going to get this highlight over here. Oops. You could grab this highlight. I'm going to grab this shadow connecting to that anchor point. I have one here I'm going to connect to. I'm going to section off my stem a little bit better. Connect there, hit escape. Connect there, hit escape. I'm going to finish off this leaf, connecting some anchor points. And then once you get all of the main shapes, so we're just working with the apple. Don't worry about the background or the table right now. What was the next step? Thinking about the form, right? So if we were thinking about the form of this, we know that this apple is rounded like a sphere. It would curve back into space. So I'm going to set up a couple guidelines, kind of showing me how I feel like that object would look if it was here in front of me in real life, thinking about its form. Be careful setting up guidelines. Don't set up like 17 lines rounding over the edge of your apple. You only need a few. My rule of thumb is one in the middle, one on the side, one on the other side, and then determine how much space is in between those areas and if you need to add another one. So I'm going to start with my one in the middle. I'm not going to round this one too much because it's that front section of my apple. I have no anchor point down here, so I need to cross a little bit. I'm going to exaggerate my cross. I'm going to add another curved area. I'm going to cross down here because there's no anchor point. And then I'm going to add another curved area. So I have 3 going down vertically here, and I'm going to add a couple going horizontally. So I want to do one in the middle. Kind of already have one set up for the shadow. I could build off of that if I wanted to, or I could add a new one. I'm going to add one at the top up here. I have an anchor point here again. Cross through, there's no good anchor point over there. And I'm going to add one more at the bottom. So I feel like I have pretty good guidelines set up for the main part of my apple. I'm going to add a few to my leaf. I feel like my leaf is bending in here. So I'm going to set up a little bend for some of those sections. And I'm also going to do a little bend heading in towards my stem here for some of these other areas. Kind of showing that this part is heading in towards that. You could do one here up the top, or there's not a lot of room for the middle, so I'm just going to leave that be. So we've got main shapes, we've got the form. Now we start breaking it down into triangles. This is where, for the project, the guidelines are 75% of it has to be triangles for your polygons. The other 25% is up to you. So if not all of it is triangles, that's okay. We want most of it to be triangles, okay? You can be intentional with your triangles. So lines kind of move our eyes in certain directions. So as my apple's curving around this edge, I want our eye to move out in that direction. So I could start to lay an anchor point and split this up into another shape, moving my eye out. And I like to kind of mirror what I do on one side to the other, especially if I have a pretty almost symmetrical object. I'm going to split this guy, let's find an anchor point here, into a triangle. I'm going to split this guy into almost a triangle. I'm going to split. No, I don't want to do that one there. If you don't like how it's looking, don't feel like you have to keep going. You can undo something, right? You can delete a line out. Let's say I don't like this line. I'm going to go back to my selection tool. Oops, click on it and then hit backspace. So if you don't like one, feel free to delete it out. I'm gonna split this guy into a triangle. This guy. And it's all about just kind of being intentional with how you're moving some of these areas about. Let's split this guy. It splits. This section's kind of bending down, so I'm going to do a line that's moving down. We have a pretty big section here I need to break up. No good anchor point over there. I'm going to connect back there. Any good anchor points to work with over here? That's pretty small. I don't want to do that. It gets tricky because we want to find the sweet spot of what's too big. I would say this section's too big and what's too small. So you want to avoid doing a ton of really small triangles unless it's a small area. So my stem is a small area, so I do need to have some smaller triangles. But my apple here, I don't need to go too small. This size here is preferable. The smaller you make them, the more work it is for you later. With that being said, you don't want to make them too big because then you're not going to have enough detail. It's going to be really, really stinking boring. Not a lot is going to be happening. So you really have to kind of find that middle ground, which is what seems to be tricky for most people. This section up here is very small. But it's not a lot. It's only 2 pieces, so I think I'm okay there. I think I'm in the clear. But I am being mindful, looking for bigger sections first, thinking about should I split them or break them up a little bit more. Do that. Okay. I think this is pretty good, especially just for a demo. So I've covered my apple. I split most of it into triangles. I'm going to go back to my black selection tool. I want to shut the grid off here. So I'm going to go back to view and hit hide grid. And now we need to bring the color back to our image. This is super important. People often forget it because they are so happy that they're done with triangles that they get to start coloring, that they just start on a whim. Please bring the color back to your image so that way the colors you steal are very bright and vivid. So we need to go into layers, go ahead and shut everything you just drew. Phew. Unlock your background, go back to properties, click on that background image so we can see the path, and then turn your opacity back up. And then I'm going to go back to layers and lock my background. And then I'm going to click back onto my low poly layer. What I need to do now is I need to click and drag my black selection tool over my entire artboard. That way I select everything I've drawn. I could go through and click on everything and hold down shift, but this is much quicker. And I need to go to window and open up my Pathfinder. A little box like this will pop up. We want to, so you still have everything selected here. Once everything's selected, we want to click on this one, this bottom left-hand guy that says divide. Nothing really magical will happen over here. What it does is it's reading where your anchor points and where your paths are. And if you've done it right, everything should be touching. And it's breaking them or dividing them into shapes. So we can go back into our layers, toggle that arrow open. You can see it's grouped this together now because we've divided it. You open up that group, you should be able to see a bunch of shapes now. So what we need to do to color is there's these little tiny circles along the edge of each shape. As you color, you're going to want to click through circles and you can see them pop up here. Let's see this one pop up. So the path is going to identify where they're at. If you feel like you're struggling to find it, zoom in. Let's say we click on another one and it's not right there. You can zoom in and zoom out and it's going to shoot you to whatever location. See, we can't see it right now. You need to be in and it's going to bring you to that area. So I'm going to start from the top and work my way down here. Close this guy up and get it out of the way. So I'm starting at my top circle, not the group, my top circle for my first shape. Zooming in, and I want to look at all the values within here. I want to pick a value that represents more than like 50% of that area. So I've got some yellows, I've got some dark reds, and I've got some light reds. I'm going to do probably one of these lighter reds. So I need to go over to my toolbar, click on my eyedropper tool here, and pick the value I want. I'm going to click on my next circle. I don't know where that shape's at. I'm zooming in, zooming out, clicking on the value that I feel like accurately represents that area. Next circle, zoom in, zoom out. If it's itty bitty tiny, you could steal from a section kind of close to that area, or you could leave it. You can delete it out later. Pick a value. And this is the coloring process here. So you'll just keep zooming in, zooming out, and picking a color that you feel like accurately represents that area. Oh, I have a really tiny guy. I'm going to go over that one. Don't worry about it. Oh, I have another one. You have a normal one now? There we go. So what I want from you, I don't like that color, is to continue coloring in your apple. And I want you to go through all of the triangles that you have made. I know it seems crazy, but I want you to see the difference between just setting up triangles versus actually setting up in those steps, thinking about main shapes, form, and then low poly. So keep coloring. Once you get it fully colored, you need to submit it to Schoology for me. Is that assignment open? No, it is not. The assignment will be open in here for you to submit that, okay? So continue going on and coloring, click on each circle and use your eyedropper tool to fill them in.